My family didn't argue with me. They didn't scream. They didn't even look back. They stopped the car in the middle of a whiteout blizzard, told me to get out, and drove away while the cold swallowed me whole. Snow was flying so hard it felt like needles on my face. The road disappeared behind us, and the sky looked like it was closing in. Please stick with me, because what happened next changed everything. I was 22 years old. I had a thin coat, no phone, no money, and no idea where I was. My hands were already numb as I stood there, watching the red lights fade into nothing. I kept waiting for them to stop, to turn around. They never did. This wasn't sudden. I see that now. For years, I was the problem. If money went missing, it was my fault. If Ronald came home angry, I set him off. My mom, Linda, would sigh and say I made things harder for everyone. My brother Caleb stopped defending me a long time ago. He just went quiet, like I didn't exist. They told me this trip was a reset, a chance to clear my head. Montana was supposed to be peaceful, they said. What they really meant was empty. Ronald looked at me like I was already gone. His voice was calm when he said, "This is what consequences look like." Then he shut the door. The cold hit fast. My legs gave out, and I dropped into the snow. It soaked through my jeans in seconds. My thoughts slowed down. I remember thinking it would be easier to just lie back. The wind was loud, but my body felt heavy and tired. That's when I heard it. A rough, shaky voice cut through the storm. "Hey, don't sit down." I lifted my head and saw a woman under the overpass nearby. Her clothes were torn, her hair wild, her face red from the cold. She looked like someone the world had forgotten. She stared straight at me and said, "If you lay down, you die." Those words snapped something awake inside me. Not hope, not courage, just fear strong enough to move. I tried to crawl toward her, my fingers burning as the snow scraped my skin. She didn't smile. She didn't comfort me. She just watched and said, "Good. Keep moving." That was the moment I realized my family hadn't just abandoned me. They had left me there to disappear. The woman didn't rush toward me. She moved slow, careful, like she had done this before. Her boots crunched through the snow as she reached for my arm. Her hands were rough and shaking, but her grip was strong. "I'm Marla," she said. "And you're freezing." She dragged me inch by inch toward the overpass. Every pull burned. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. I kept slipping, my face hitting the snow, but she didn't let go. She kept muttering, "Stay awake. Don't close your eyes." Her voice was blunt, almost sharp, but it kept me moving. Under the overpass, the wind calmed a little. The noise dropped. It felt like stepping out of a screaming room into a quiet one. Marla wrapped a dirty blanket around my shoulders and sat me against the concrete wall. She studied my face like she was counting something. "You were left," she said flatly. I tried to speak, but my jaw wouldn't work. She didn't wait for an answer. "I've seen this before," she went on. "People don't get dumped in storms by accident. Storms erase things." That sentence hit harder than the cold. I shook, not just from freezing, but from the truth in her voice. Marla told me how people die in blizzards. How they get tired. How they think resting will help. How families tell themselves lies so they can sleep at night. She spoke like someone who had learned everything the hard way. I looked down at my bag. It was light. Too light. No charger. No extra clothes. No wallet. My phone had gone missing days before the trip, and I had blamed myself for losing it. Now the pieces lined up in a way that made my stomach drop. "They planned this," Marla said quietly, like she was talking about the weather. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say my mother wouldn't do that. But I remembered how calm she was in the car. How she stared straight ahead while Ronald told me to get out. How Caleb didn't say a single word. Marla leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes for a second. "Families can be the worst kind of strangers," she said. The cold was still there, deep in my bones, but something else settled in too. A heavy, sinking feeling that this wasn't a mistake or a moment of anger. It was a choice, and they had made it together. The storm didn't stop right away. Snow kept falling, slow and heavy, like the world was being buried layer by layer. Marla said that was normal. "Blizzards don't rush," she told me. "They wait you out." We sat under the overpass, sharing the quiet. My hands slowly started to feel again, and the pain came back with them. It was sharp and deep, but it kept me awake. Marla handed me a piece of stale bread. I chewed slowly, my mind finally clear enough to think. That's when everything started to connect. Months before the trip, my savings were gone. The account my real father had set up for me before he died. Ronald said it must have been fees or a mistake. My mom agreed too quickly. I remembered how she avoided my eyes when I asked about it again. I remembered signing papers I didn't understand because she said they were routine. Then there was the phone. Caleb had offered to check something, on it days before we left. After that, it disappeared. I thought I had lost it. Now I knew better. I told Marla all of this, my words tumbling out in broken pieces. She didn't interrupt. She didn't act surprised. She just listened, her face calm, almost tired. Caleb had also talked to the police once. I found out later, after a fight at home. He told them I was unstable, emotional, that I made things up. At the time, I thought it was just him being angry. Sitting there in the cold, I understood what it really was. A record. A story already written about me. The reset trip wasn't meant to help me. It wasn't about space or healing. It was about removing a problem. Me. My chest felt tight as the truth settled in. I wasn't pushed out in a moment of anger. I was guided there slowly, step by step, until there was nothing left to protect me. Marla finally spoke. Her voice was low and steady. They're counting on you not surviving. The words landed hard. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just true. I looked out at the snow-covered road and imagined how easy it would have been for them to say I wandered off. Got confused. Froze somewhere no one would look. The story was already prepared. Something shifted inside me then. Not rage. Not tears. Clarity. If they expected me to disappear, then surviving wasn't just luck. It was the one thing they never planned for. I don't remember the ride to the hospital clearly. I remember lights flashing through the snow and hands lifting me onto a stretcher. I remember someone saying my temperature was dangerously low. After that, everything blurred together. When I woke up, the room was warm and too bright. My body hurt in places I didn't know could hurt. Tubes were taped to my arms. A nurse told me I had severe hypothermia and that I was lucky. That word felt strange. Lucky didn't feel real. A police officer came later. He asked gentle questions. Where was I found? Did I know who left me there? I told him what I could. The report was written carefully. In clean, distant words. Abandoned by unknown persons. Unknown. That's what my family became on paper. I asked about Marla. No one had seen her. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. All she left behind was a scrap of cardboard with a phone number written in shaky ink. Under it, 3 words were pressed hard into the paper. Don't go home. I held that cardboard like it was something fragile. Proof that she had been real. That I hadn't imagined her. Over the next few days, doctors focused on my body. On my fingers. My toes. They talked about recovery and rest. But my mind was busy somewhere else. I kept thinking about my family sitting together, calm, telling their version of the story. If I stayed quiet, nothing would happen to them. They would cry. They would say they tried to help me. They would call it a misunderstanding. And everyone would believe them, because I was the difficult one. That scared me more than the storm ever did. Surviving wasn't enough. Breathing again didn't fix what they had done. It didn't stop them from doing it again, to me or someone else. For the first time, I thought about myself as someone worth protecting. I asked to speak to a social worker. Then another officer. I didn't accuse. I didn't shout. I just told the truth, slowly and clearly. I asked questions. I listened. Each small step felt heavy, but it also felt right. That night, alone in the hospital bed, I looked at the ceiling and made a quiet decision. I wasn't going back to the role they gave me. I wasn't going to disappear to make things easier. They had chosen to leave me in the cold. I chose not to stay silent. I wasn't supposed to hear them. That's what made it worse. A nurse left the TV on low volume while she changed my four. I was half asleep when a familiar voice pulled me back. My mother's voice. Soft. Shaky. Perfectly practiced. She was on the news. They were reporting me as missing. Linda sat with her hands folded, eyes red, speaking like a woman who hadn't slept. She said I was troubled. That I had mood swings. That I ran off when things got hard. She said they loved me and just wanted me safe. I felt my stomach twist. Then Ronald spoke. Calm and steady. He explained how they had tried to help me. How the trip was meant to give me space. He never once mentioned the blizzard. Not the cold. Not the road. Caleb stood beside them. He nodded at the right moments. When asked about me, he said I could be unpredictable. That I scared him sometimes. The words came out smooth, like he had practiced them in a mirror. Every lie landed like a hit. They weren't looking for me. They were building a story. A story where they were the worried family, and I was the problem who wandered off. A story that explained everything without blaming them for anything. I turned my face toward the wall and bit down hard, so I wouldn't make a sound. My hands shook, not from the cold this time, but from anger and shock. The nurse came back and asked if I was okay. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. Later, a detective stopped by my room. He asked if I had seen the report. I said yes. He watched my face carefully. I told him that what they said wasn't true. Not in a loud way. Just firm. That was when it finally clicked. If they thought I was dead, they wouldn't need the cameras. They wouldn't need tears or stories. They would be quiet. They were afraid. Afraid that I would speak. Afraid that I would contradict them. Afraid that I would walk back into the world and prove their version wrong. They weren't worried about losing me. They were worried about being exposed. That realization hurt more than anything else so far. It meant the people who were supposed to protect me were now protecting themselves. I stared at the ceiling that night, replaying every moment in the car, every calm look, every silence. And I understood something clearly for the first time. They didn't leave me in the storm by accident. They left me there hoping I wouldn't come back. Recovery was slow. My body healed faster than my trust ever could. I stayed quiet like the doctors advised, but not for the reasons they thought. Quiet gave me space to think. A social worker helped me arrange a short visit to the house to collect a few things. An officer came with me. Ronald wasn't home. My mother barely looked at me. The house felt smaller, like it was holding its breath. In my old room, I opened drawers I hadn't touched in months. That's when I found the first envelope. It was stuffed behind a loose panel in the desk. Inside were bank statements with my name on them. Accounts I didn't recognize. Dates that lined up with the months my savings vanished. My hands went cold as I kept looking. In the garage, tucked inside a box labeled tax stuff, I found insurance papers. My late father's name. A policy I was never told about. It had been changed. Updated. Signed by someone else. Ronald. He hadn't shredded everything. He had rushed. He had assumed I wouldn't be around to notice. I copied everything. Photos. Notes. Dates. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't cry. I felt strangely calm, like a fog had lifted. Back at the hospital, Marla's voice replayed in my head. Storms erase things. Families erase people. This wasn't about screaming or payback. It wasn't about ruining them in one loud moment. That kind of anger burns out fast. This was about truth, placed carefully where it couldn't be ignored. I started organizing everything by date. I wrote down conversations I remembered. Who said what? When my phone disappeared. When the reset trip was planned. Small details that suddenly mattered. Each piece alone looked harmless. Together, they told a very clear story. I learned to slow down. To wait. To listen more than I spoke. My family still thought I was weak, confused, grateful to be alive. They didn't realize how much they had left behind. At night, I imagined how close I came to disappearing. How easy it would have been for all this to stay buried. That thought kept me steady. I wasn't driven by hate. I was driven by clarity. They had tried to erase me and failed. Now, I would make sure the truth stayed visible. Not loud. Not messy. Precise. And for the first time since the blizzard, I felt something close to control returning to my hands. I went back home quietly, carrying the weight of every memory and every wrong done to me. I wore a smile I didn't feel. I said the words they wanted to hear. I'm sorry for worrying you. I'll be more careful next time. They believed it. They relaxed. They thought I was fragile, broken, and grateful. At dinner, my mother fussed over me. Caleb hovered nearby, pretending to be supportive. Ronald acted like nothing had happened, joking lightly about the cold weather, expecting me to laugh along. I did. Just small nods, soft laughter, enough to make them think the storm was behind us. No one noticed the tension behind my eyes. No one guessed that every word, every gesture was a mask. I had learned their patterns, their pauses, the way they assumed I wouldn't notice. They thought the act of surviving had left me weak. I let them believe it. Meanwhile, I worked quietly. I handed copies of bank statements, insurance records, and the paperwork from my father's estate to the investigator. Not directly. I sent them anonymously, wrapped in plain envelopes, with notes explaining the discrepancies. Each letter was a quiet arrow into the center of their story. I waited as the investigators started asking questions. Slowly, carefully, the cracks appeared. Ronald's sudden trips to the bank became suspicious. Linda's evasive answers grew sharper under questioning. Caleb's rehearsed statements slipped once or twice, tiny hesitations revealing that he had lied. I didn't need to shout or confront them directly. I didn't need dramatic confrontations or public exposure. I let the truth move like water, slow, unstoppable. I let it seep in, freeze, and crack under their feet. At night, I sat in my room, thinking about the blizzard, the snow, Marla's voice telling me to survive. That advice didn't just save my life. It showed me that patience and observation were weapons. My family thought the danger was over. They thought I was powerless. But the ice was breaking beneath them, and they didn't even know it. I had survived the storm. I had survived their betrayal. Now, I was letting them feel safe while everything they built on lies quietly collapsed. I wasn't reckless. I was precise, calm, and finally in control. For the first time, I understood the power of patience. It was sharper than anger, sharper than yelling, sharper than any storm they could throw at me. The first call came quietly. A detective asked if I would speak with him again for clarity. I agreed. I didn't need to be loud or dramatic. The storm I had survived was coming back, but this time, it wasn't snow, it was truth. Weeks later, I watched as the case was reopened. The abandonment report, once unknown persons, became a focus. Investigators started asking about my missing savings, about insurance changes, about the paperwork Ronald had altered. They started pulling every little thread, and I knew exactly where it would lead. Ronald was first. He sat in a sterile office, trying to explain things calmly, but his words sounded small and uncertain. Each question made him stumble. Each paper they produced made his face tighten. He had built a wall of lies, and now it was cracking. Linda didn't speak much. At first, her silence looked like grief or worry. But the investigators kept asking, and her quiet became weighty. She shifted, fidgeted, paused too long, and gave answers that contradicted each other. Every hesitation was a nail in the story they had crafted for themselves. Caleb's panic was obvious. He called my mother's office multiple times, pacing, trying to control the narrative. He tried to rehearse his lies again, but this time the questions were sharper, unexpected. His voice wavered, and the calm mask he always wore slipped. I remembered the blizzard, the way the cold had stolen my breath, made my hands numb, made my body heavy. Now I watched the same fear settle in their chests. It wasn't physical, but it was sharp, relentless. The fear of being exposed. The fear of the truth. I stayed quiet at first, observing. I didn't need to confront them. The storm was moving through them, piece by piece. The evidence I had found, the notes I had kept, the proof that Ronald had tried to erase, it was all working. They couldn't run, they couldn't hide. Each day, a little more of their carefully controlled story fell apart. One by one, the lies they had built to protect themselves collapsed. It wasn't loud or messy. It was precise, slow, unstoppable. For the first time, I felt a strange satisfaction. The fear that had once been mine, freezing me in the snow, was now theirs. They finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. And this time, there was no one to save them. The first message came on a quiet morning. My phone buzzed, and I saw it was my mother. The text was short. "Evelyn, please call. We need you." My stomach twisted, but I didn't reply. By evening, there were more messages, calls, emails, even a letter hand-delivered by Caleb. They didn't apologize. Not once. Instead, they explained. They blamed each other. Ronald said it was a misunderstanding. Linda said she didn't know he would take it so far. Caleb tried to shift blame to both of them. I read every word, heard every voice when I replayed the calls. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just listened. I remembered Marla's voice under the overpass. "If you lay down, you die." She hadn't meant just the snow. She meant life. She meant survival. She meant never letting someone else control your fate again. The tears and excuses weren't real to me. They were performances. Words to make them feel better about themselves. Words to make me return to the person I used to be. The one they thought was weak and broken. I pictured the blizzard again, the icy wind, the weight of snow pressing against my body, my fingers stiff and useless. That fear, that desperation, it had belonged to me. It wasn't something I would hand back to them. Not now. I didn't text, didn't call. I didn't open the door when Caleb showed up at my apartment. He looked nervous, panicked even, trying to explain, trying to make me see reason. I stayed silent. I watched. The truth had finally come out. Their lies, their manipulation, their cruelty. They had caught up with them. Their world, once calm and controlled, was shaky and uncertain. Now they were the ones afraid. Now they were the ones begging. But begging changes nothing. Apologies come too late when the trust is gone, when the damage is done. I had survived their storm, survived their betrayal, survived their games. I didn't owe them anything. I took a deep breath and let it go. Not in anger, not in satisfaction, but in clarity. They were not my responsibility anymore. I wouldn't save them from the consequences they had created. I walked away quietly, knowing that sometimes the strongest choice is simply not to lift anyone who chose to leave you in the cold. Their fear was real. Their loss was real. And I finally felt free. The wind was calm that morning. I drove back to the overpass, the place where my life had almost ended and where it had changed completely. I hoped to see her again, Marla, the woman who had pulled me from the snow, who had told me to survive when my own family left me to die. The overpass was quiet. Snow had melted in patches, leaving the concrete cold and gray. I searched the area carefully, calling her name softly, but there was no reply. Only the blanket remained, the one she had wrapped me in that night. It was folded neatly on the edge of the pavement, almost like a message waiting for me. I knelt down and picked it up, feeling the rough fabric between my fingers. I remembered how heavy it had felt when I was shivering, how it had given me just enough warmth to keep going. I thought of Marla's eyes, steady and unflinching, and her words that had stayed with me. If you lay down, you die. I left the blanket where it was, folded exactly as I found it. I placed a small stack of cash beside it, enough to help someone in need, and I added a note. On it I wrote 3 simple words. I lived. Standing there, I felt a strange calm. For the first time since that night in the blizzard, I wasn't cold. Not just physically, I wasn't frozen in fear, anger, or doubt. My chest felt light. My mind was clear. I had survived more than a storm. I had survived betrayal, lies, and the people who were supposed to love me. I looked back once at the overpass and then turned away. The road stretched ahead, open and empty, and I walked toward it without hesitation. I wasn't disposable anymore. I wasn't the child they had tried to erase. My family had lost everything in trying to destroy me, but I had gained something they could never touch, myself. Every step felt warmer than the night I had been left behind. Every breath was mine, not theirs. I didn't need revenge or apologies or recognition. I only needed to live, and I was doing it fully, freely, finally. As I walked away, I realized the truth of it. Letting go of them didn't take strength, it gave it. I survived the storm, I survived my family, and now I walked into my own life, whole and unbroken. If you ever feel trapped or abandoned, remember survival is not just about escaping danger. It's about protecting yourself and your future. Document, observe, and seek help when needed. Stand firm, know your rights, and never let anyone erase your life or your voice. Your safety and clarity come first.